All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and totally fictional Imperial Archive. It tackles this incredible thought experiment. What happens when the ultimate symbol of hope gets dropped into a universe that literally survives on despair? This is the story of the Superman Incursion.
So, the whole mystery really kicks off with his arrival. See, it wasn't some violent terror in reality, not like your typical warp storm. Instead, the archive says that reality itself just hesitated. The event was so alien, so completely outside the rules of this universe, that it didn't start with a bang. It started with a glitch.
And you gotta understand, this glitch is the key to this whole thing. The Imperium, this is an empire that documents everything, and yet it completely failed to record his arrival. Their whole system of understanding has these neat little boxes: demonic, xenos, mutant, but he didn't fit in any of them. He was, for them, an ontological anomaly, a system error. Okay, so to really get what happens next, we first have to wrap our heads around the brutal, fundamental logic of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It's not just a backdrop for war, it's a reality that's defined by it, where the best you can hope for is just delaying the end for one more day. And this, right here, lays the whole conflict bare. It was never going to be about who's stronger. It was a clash of moral physics. You've got one being who believes every single life is precious, running headlong into a galactic system that sees trillions of lives as nothing more than fuel for its war machine. And that's the essence of the problem, isn't it? The entire galaxy survives on principles that are the absolute polar opposite of everything Superman stands for. It's a system that has weaponized suffering, and into this gaping wound steps the living embodiment of a cure it literally cannot accept. So this fundamental conflict, it played out in some really fascinating ways, because he just couldn't be understood by the established rules. The galaxy's major powers, well, they started to just break when they ran into him.
Take the orcs. Their whole existence is powered by the Wa, right? It's this collective psychic energy they generate from the pure, unadulterated joy of a good fight. But Superman, he didn't give them that. He just dismantled their war machine, subdued them without any real slaughter. The archive says they could not mythologize him. So their whole belief-fueled engine just stalled out.
And the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, oh man, they were just as baffled and completely horrified. What they saw was a machine of flesh that did not degrade, and a weapon that did not require worship. In a universe that's all about decay and praying to machine spirits, his perfect self-sustaining biology was a violation of universal law. It was absolute heresy. His effect on the forces of chaos was just as massive. When they threw their usual playbook at him, temptation, rage, fear, none of it stuck. He didn't fight them with faith, because faith can be twisted. He fought them with simple, undeniable clarity. And the archive notes something really chilling. The warp wasn't wounded, it was unfed. He was something chaos just couldn't digest. But here's the thing. Superman's most dangerous weapon? It wasn't his heat vision, it wasn't his strength. It was something way more subtle and 1,000 times more threatening to the Imperium. It was the one thing their entire galactic system is built from the ground up to extinguish. This line from the archive, wow. This reveals the Imperium's deepest, darkest fear. They have protocols for corruption, for mutation, for heresy, but they had no protocol for a counter-narrative to despair. On the worlds he touched, people started to believe a better way was actually possible. And that belief was a virus. It started dissolving the very foundations of imperial control. You had guardsmen starting to question suicide charges, governors questioning policy. This wasn't a rebellion with guns and ships, it was an ideological collapse. In a system that runs on desperation, hope is basically a solvent. So the Imperium couldn't defeat him in a fight, they couldn't corrupt him, and since he refused to be worshipped, they couldn't control him either. So they were forced to use their final, most devastating weapon. And it wasn't a fleet or an army. It was something far, far more cruel. So the Inquisition, the secret heart of the Imperium, they're faced with this huge question. When brute force doesn't work, and you can't co-opt the threat, what's left? How in the world do you stop a concept like hope? And the answer they came up with was just chillingly brilliant in how cruel it was. They decided you don't destroy the man. You force him to confront the terrible, unbreakable logic of their reality. They weren't going to kill him. They were going to show him why he was wrong. So they set up this perfect trap. They brought him to Holy Terra, the heart of the Imperium, and there they showed him the Emperor of Mankind. Not some living god, but a psychic corpse engine, kept in a state of perpetual death. They laid out the awful truth. This one grotesque, unending sacrifice is the only thing stopping the galaxy from being eaten alive by chaos. And then they gave him the choice. Let this suffering continue, or save humanity and condemn it to a fate so much worse. And in that moment, staring at the truth of the Golden Throne, a system where cruelty is the actual price of survival, his absolute moral clarity was finally challenged. For the very first time, he was faced with a problem he couldn't punch, a wrong he couldn't right without causing an even greater one. And that checkmate, that hesitation, it leads us to the tragic. And really, the only possible conclusion for his time in this nightmare galaxy. This was never about winning or losing a fight. See, true victory was just impossible on his terms. To fix this universe, he would have to force it to be better. He'd have to impose his will on trillions, become a benevolent tyrant, and in doing so, destroy the very moral code that made him who he was. And so, he left. He wasn't beaten. He wasn't broken. He was simply incompatible. He was a paradox in a reality that is, at its core, allergic to hope. The system didn't defeat him. It just rejected him, like a foreign body it could never, ever integrate. The final archive entry leaves us with this. The Imperium's ultimate verdict, it wasn't on the man, but on the very idea he represented. In the grim darkness of the far future, hope isn't a virtue, it's a contamination. And it just leaves you with this one question, doesn't it? What does it say about a reality when its only possible hero exists just to prove what it can never become?